Good evening and hello. My name is Ryan Monroe Huffman. Now, I am not an actor, an entertainer, or for that any case, a master storyteller, but I do enjoy doing impersonations, and as someone who enjoys doing what he does, even if it is for a bit of fun, I thought, why not try doing a YouTube video or just a ordinary video? Well, here I am, about to tell you my story. Well, technically, the story of St. George and the Dragon. Yes, I know, Gandalf. I know. I'll be there in a bit. St. George and the Dragon, retold by Margaret Hodges and illustrated by Trina Chart Hyman. And if you're wondering, well, I don't know yet who I'm going to, well, I'll read this tale as if Sean Connery himself was telling the story. In the days when monsters and giants and fairy folk lived in England, a noble knight was riding across a plain. He wore heavy armor and carried an ancient silver shield marked with a cross. It was dented with the blows of many battles fought long ago by other brave knights. The Red Cross Knight had ne'er yet faced a foe, and did not even know his name or where he had been born. But now he was bound on a great adventure, sent by the Queen of the Fairies to try his young strength against a deadly enemy, a dragon grim and horrible. Beside him, on a little white donkey, rode a princess leading a white lamb, and behind her came a dwarf carrying a small bundle of food. The lady's lovely face was veiled and her shoulders were covered in a black cloak, as if she had hidden a hidden sorrow in her heart. Her name was Una. Sorry, this is my baby boy, Gandalf. He's a curious little thing, isn't he? The dreadful dragon was the cause of her sorrow. He was laying waste to her land, so that many frightened people had left their homes and run away. Others had shut themselves inside the walls of a castle with Una's father and mother, the king and queen of the country. But Una had set out alone from the safety of the castle walls to look for a champion who would face the terrible dragon. She had travelled a long, long way before she found the Red Cross Knight. Like a sailor long at sea under stormy winds and fierce suns, who begins to whistle merrily when he sees land, so Una was thankful. Now the travellers rode together through wild wood and wilderness and dangers and perils towards Una's kingdom. The path they had set to follow was straight and narrow, but not easy to see. Sometimes the Red Cross Knight rode too far ahead of Una and lost his way. Then, when she had to find him and guide him back to the path, they journeyed on, with Una by his side, fair and faithful. No monster and giant could stand before the knight's great sword. After many days, the path became thorny and led up a steep hillside, where a great good old hermit lived in a little house by himself. While Una rested, the Red Cross Knight climbed with the hermit to the top of the hill and looked out across the valley. There, against the evening sky, they saw a mountain top that touched the highest heavens. It was crowned with a glorious palace, sparkling like stars and circled with walls and towers of pearls and precious stones. Joyful angels were coming and going between heaven and the high city. Then the Red Cross Knight saw that a little path led up the distant mountain to that city, and he said, "I thought that the fairest palace in the world was the crystal tower in the fair city of the fairy queen. Now I see a palace far more lovely. Una and I should go there at once." But the hermit said, "The fairy queen has sent you to do brave deeds in the world. That high city you see is in another world. Before you climb the path to it and hang your shield on the wall, go down into the valley and fight the dragon that you were sent to fight. It is time for me to tell you that you were not born of the fairy folk, but of English earth. The fairies stole you away as a baby while you slept in your cradle. They hid you in a farmer's field where a ploughman found you. He called you George, which means plough the earth and fight the good fight. For you were born to be England's friend and patron saint, St. George of Merry England." Then George, the Red Cross Knight, returned to Una, and when morning came, together they went down into the valley. They rode through farmlands where men and women working in their fields looked up and cheered because a champion had come to fight the dragon, and children clapped their hands to see the brave knight and lady ride by. "Now we have come to my own country," said Una. "Be on your guard. For see, there is the city and the great brass tower that my parents built strong enough to stand against the brassy scaled dragon. There are my father and mother looking out from the walls, and the watchman stands at the top, waiting to call out the good news if help is coming." Then they heard a hideous roaring that filled the air with terror and seemed to shake the ground. The dreadful dragon lay stretched across on the sunny side of the great hill, like a great hill himself, and when he saw the knight's armour glistening in the sunset, he came eagerly to do battle. The knight bade his lady stand apart out of danger to watch the fight, while the beast drew near, half flying and half running. His great size made a wide shadow under his huge body as a mountain casts a shadow on a valley. He reared high, monstrous, and horrible and vast, armoured all over with scales of bronze fitted so closely that no sword nor spear could pierce them. They clashed with every moment. The dragon's wings spread out like two sails when the wind fills them. The clouds fed before him, his long tail, speckled red and black, wound in 100 folds over his scaly back and swept the land behind him for almost half a mile. In his tail's end, two sharp stings were fixed. but sharper still were his huge claws. Whatever he touched or drew within those claws was in deadly danger. His head was more hideous than tongue can tell, for his deep jaws gaped wide, showing 3 rows of iron teeth ready to devour his prey. A cloud of smothering smoke and burning sulphur poured from his throat, filling the air with its stench. Gandalf, come on, boy. His blazing eyes, flaming with rage, glared out from deep in his head, so he came toward the knight, raising his speckled breast, clashing his scales as he leaped to greet his newest victim. The knight on horseback rode fiercely at the dragon with all his might and couched his spear, but as they passed, the pointed steel glanced off the dragon's hard hide. The wrathful beast, surprised at the strength of the blow, turned quickly, and passing the knight again, brushed his long tail so that horse and man fell to the ground. Once more the Red Cross Knight mounted and attacked the dragon. Once more in vain, yet the beast had ne'er felt such a mighty stroke from the hand of any man. He was furious with revenge. With his waving wings spread wide, he lifted himself high from the ground, then steeping low, snatched up both man and horse to carry them away. High above the plain he bore them as far as a bow can shoot an arrow. But even the knight still struggled until the monster was forced to lower his paws, so that both man and horse and rider fought free. With the strength of 3 men, again the knight struck. The spear glanced off the scaly neck, but it pierced the dragon's left wing, spread broad above him, and the beast roared like a raging sea in a winter storm. Furious, he snatched the spear in his claws and broke it off, throwing flames of fire from his nostrils. Then he curled his hideous tail about and wrapped it around the length of the horse until, striving to loosen the knot, the horse threw its rider to the ground. Quickly the knight rose. He drew his sharp sword and struck the dragon's head so fiercely that it seemed nothing could withstand the blow. The dragon's chest was too hard to make a cut, but he wanted no more such blows. He tried to fly away, but could not because of his wounded wing. Loudly he bellowed, the like was never heard before, and from his body, like the wide devouring oven, sent a flame of fire that scorched the knight's face and heated his armor red hot. Faint, weary, sore, burning with heat and wounds, the knight fell to the ground, ready to die, and the dragon clapped his iron wings in victory, while the lady, watching from afar, fell to her knees. She thought her champion had lost the battle, but it happened that where the knight fell, an ancient spring of silvery water bubbled from the ground. In that cool water the knight lay resting until the sun rose. Then he too rose to do battle again. And when the dragon saw him, he could barely believe his eyes. Could this be the same knight, he wondered, or another had come to take his place? The knight brandished his bright blade, and it seemed sharper than ever. his hands even stronger, he smote the crested head with a blow so mighty that the dragon reared up like 100 raging lions. His long, stinging tail threw down high trees and tore rocks to pieces. Lashing forward, it pierced the knight's shield, and its point stuck fast in his shoulder. He tried to free himself from the barbed sting, but when he saw that his struggles were in vain, he raised his fighting sword and struck a blow that cut off the dragon's tail. Heart cannot think what outrage, what cries, with black smoke and flashing fire, the beast threw forth, turning the whole world to darkness. Gathering himself up and wild for revenge, he fiercely fell upon the sun-bright shield and gripped it fast with his paws. 3 times the knight tried to pull the shield free, then laying about him, and with his trusty sword he struck so many blows that fire flew from the dragon's coat like sparks from an anvil, and the beast raised one paw to defend himself. Striking with might and main, the knight severed the other paw, still clung to the shield. Now from the furnace inside himself the dragon threw huge flames that covered all the heavens with smoke and brimstone, so that the knight was forced to retreat to save his body from the scorching fire. Again, weary and wounded with his long fight, he fell. When gentle Una saw him lying motionless, she trembled with fear and prayed for his safety. But he had fallen beneath a fair apple tree, its spreading branches covered with red fruit, and from that tree dropped a healing dew that the deadly dragon did not dare come near. Gandalf, silly kitty. Once more the daylight faded and the night spread over the earth. Under the apple tree, the knight slept. Then dawn chased away the dark. A lark mounted to heaven. Then dawn chased away the dark. A lark mounted up to heaven. And up rose the brave knight with all his hurts and wounds healed, ready to fight again. When the dragon saw him, he began to be afraid. Still he rushed upon the knight, mouth gaping wide to swallow him whole. And the knight's bright weapon, taking advantage of that open jaw, ran it through with such strength that the dragon fell dead, breathing his last in smoke and cloud. Like a mountain he fell and lay still. The knight himself trembled to see that fall, and his dear lady did not dare to come near to thank her faithful knight until she saw that the dragon would stir no more. Now our ship comes to port. Furl the sails and drop anchor. Safe from the storm, Una is at her journey's end. The watchman on the castle wall called out to the king and queen that the dragon was dead, and when the old king saw that it was true, he ordered the castle's great brass gates to be opened, and so that the tidings of peace and joy may spread across throughout the land. Trumpets sounded the news that the great beast had fallen. Then the king and queen came out of the city with all their nobles to meet the Red Cross knight. Tall young men led the way, carrying laurel branches to lay at the hero's feet. The pretty girls wore wreaths of flowers and made music on tambourines. The children came dancing, laughing, and singing, with a crown of flowers for Luna. They gazed in wonder at the victorious knight. But when the people saw where the dragon lay, they dared not come near to touch him. Some ran away, some pretended not to be afraid. One said that the dragon may still be alive. One said they saw fire in the eyes. Another said the eyes were moving. When a foolish child ran forward to touch the dragon's claws, his mother scolded him. "How can I tell?" she said. "Those claws may scratch my son or tear his tender hand." At least some of the bolder men began to measure the dragon to prove how many acres his body covered. The old king embraced and kissed his daughter. He gave gifts of gold and ivory and 1,000 thanks to the dragon slayer. But the knight told the king never to forget the poor people and gave the rich gifts to them. Then back to the palace all the people went, still singing, to feast and to hear the story of the knight's adventures with Una. When the tale ended, and the king said, "Never did any man sail through such a sea of deadly dangers. Since you are now safely come to shore and stay here and live happily ever after, you have earned your rest." But the brave knight answered, "No, my lord, I have sworn to give knight service to the fairy queen for 6 years. Until then, I cannot rest." The king said, "I have promised that the dragon slayer should have my daughter and be king after me. If you love each other, my daughter is yours now. My kingdom shall be yours when you have done your service toward the fairy queen and returned to us." Then he called Una, who came no longer wearing her black cloak and veil, but dressed in a lily-white gown that shimmered like silver. Never before had the knight seen her so beautiful. Whenever he looked at the brightness of her sunshiny face, his heart melted with pleasure. So Una and the Red Cross Knight were married and lived together peacefully. But the knight did not forget his promise to serve the fairy queen, and when she called to him to service, so off he rode on brave adventures until at last he earned his name, St. George of Merry England. That is how, when jolly sailors come into a quiet harbour, they unload their cargo, mend ship, and take on fresh supplies. Then away they sail on another long voyage, while we are left on shore, waving goodbye and Godspeed. The end.